Hello.
Hi, Karen.
Hello.
Do I hear Mike
Yep.
Horak's voice saying hi, Karen?
Hello.
Oh my God, I'm so glad I can identify your voice because I apparently can't read on my screens fast enough.
Oh, okay.
How are you doing today, sir?
Good. Thank you very much.
Well, no, thank you for coming today.
Yeah.
And who else do we have? People are welcome to unmute themselves and say hello for a couple of moments because I know it's been a while since we've seen each other. And thank you everybody for coming today. So we got a lot of different organizations represented, which is terrific. Oh, and my noon chime is going off. Can you hear the noon chime? Oh my goodness, that's good, I guess. Jameson, is everybody in, you think, or we still got some little traffic? Folks are in the waiting room still. Having refreshments and all, right?
Yeah, folks are still trickling in, so I would give it one more minute.
Okay.
Oh, sorry about that.
Everyone's in for now, and I'll keep letting them in as they come.
Great. Well, welcome everybody. We got some good turnout for today's the art of reopening. So thank you for, it looks like we got some representation from throughout Chester County, through from mostly arts and culture and historic preservation organizations and some human service groups, some board members, some contributors, some patrons of the arts. It's a really nice mix of folks. So thank you for coming today. You've been sent the slides, plus Jameson just put up a link for all the others. And today we're going to have a really robust discussion, I think, on the art of reopening. Jameson's running the slides, so thank you for that, Jameson. Feel free to enter comments into the chat room because that will help. And if you feel that you'd like to say something, I'm fine with folks kind of bursting in a little bit to add to the conversation that's on the table. We don't have a lot of time. We're going to talk about for an hour or so. So let's make this a discussion. What we had a couple weeks ago, our first Art of Reopening, focusing specifically on arts, culture, and heritage nonprofits. And I'm going to just take the short run and say arts here. So don't be insulted if you consider yourself culture and historic preservation. Arts is going to be my term for expediency. So today, thank you to Heather from Historic Sugartown, Anthony from Oxford Arts Alliance, Emily from the Colonial, April from Uptown, Connor from the History Center, and Jane from People's Light. We've got a lot going on with trying to reopen, and some of you have been open at different levels throughout. So we thought we would put that together. And we have some really fabulous co-promoters who have been helping us out with this as well. So I really do thank, of course, the Cultural Alliance is in Philadelphia has been helping us throughout this and getting the Cultural Alliance of Chester County reopened as well. And of course, the Brandywine Conference and Visitors Bureau, the Chester County Conference and Visitors Bureau, and Restore Chester County. So thank you everybody for co-promoting this and help getting the word out. Some of the facts and figures on the next page, actually, Jameson, if you want to hit that button there. You know, the Americans for the Arts, everybody's putting out figures on what's been happening with the arts throughout the nation and the world. But the biggest ones that hit me are right in the middle in red and green. 12% of arts and culture organizations have remained open throughout the last year. A third have reopened. 40% of arts, culture, and historic preservation groups has no target date for reopening. And as we all know, we're going to be talking about government restrictions and guidelines. The fact that vaccines are more distributed widely, but even though they are, there's going to be a lot of hesitancy. We saw that yesterday in some of our calls we were making for the community foundations because people don't feel it's safe and folks are unlikely to attend in the same numbers as prior to COVID. So we've got a lot of issues on right sizing. I think when we look at the next page, actually, Jameson, that'll start to get us to some planning considerations. Because the fact is, we've all had culture shock. Uh, as we're really listening to what's happening, I think what we're really taking a look at where we're headed and um, what's going to be different about our futures and how can we reframe what we're doing in a post-COVID world and how might our model evolve? Jameson, I'm getting a lot of feedback on my end. Are you also?
Yes, I can hear that. Someone knows it's them. Maybe you can mute yourself.
Can everybody else mute for a moment so I can figure this out?
I think I took care of it. I'll message the person just to let them know that I muted them.
Okay, let's try that again.
So
Thank you very much. So if you're the person who had that horrible background, sorry, we don't want to hear that. But everybody else, please jump into conversation soon enough. And so there's different models. What we've been hearing about is to having planning groups looking at where we're headed, taking a look at our structure, how we organize, taking a look at governance and management decisions. And then what are we going to need in these post-COVID reopening world from our people and our leaders? There's envisioning a different future and resiliency are going to be really, really, really important. And there's some key roles that are more critical, I think, in a post-COVID future, especially with IT, social media. There's some ideas out there. Culturally, I mean, our ways of working are going to be different. We're going to have more innovation and flexibility. And as we know, being flexible has been key. And embracing digital, which I think many arts, culture, and preservation groups have done pretty well to start with, but we got a lot farther to go to really keep up with what the rest of the world maybe is going to be doing in entertainment and administration, as well as just overall the digital age has been thrust upon us in different ways. So we know that as we look ahead for reopening and post-COVID, we're going to be continuing what we do virtually in some way. There's going to be a phased reopening. Different groups of all kinds are going to look at timing, numbers of people, percentage, proportion, dollars, distancing requirements, going further than those requirements in public confidence and safety. And we're going to have some kind of hybrid. We're going to have to look at the benefits of virtual plus the benefits of in-person and make decisions about our programs and services on a really flexible basis for quite a while. So that's sort of planning considerations for governing board members and senior staff to really be clear on. And as we look at the next page, Jameson, we just put a couple different models out for how different groups are looking at reopening. So again, these are different planning processes, taking a look at the trends that are affecting our arts organizations, separating the trash from the treasure, what you know from what you don't know, doing some mapping and some scenario planning. Consider the worst case and the best case. Don't ignore the worst case scenario because it has happened and could happen again. And flexibility and adaptation are key. And the arts are really good at adaptation and flexibility, especially our flexible dancers. So adapting is going to be key for that and flexibility. On the bottom, you see another kind of planning model. And I've heard a lot of this as we've been talking with folks. Of course, it's putting people's safety first. And sometimes that gets kind of irritating with perhaps governing board members who just want to reopen because of the finances. And there's some, what do we call that, dynamic tension between CEOs and board members about, is it people or financing when organizations are sort of financially on the edge. So putting people's safety first on all levels and communicating with stakeholders. And that's going to be the focus of our next session because it's so important that we manage expectations and let people know what the expectations are. And really taking a look overall at our business models to be able to alter things quickly and adapting our plans and budgets for them. And as we said before, resilience. Really taking a look at reviewing what we're doing and resetting and restarting on a much more nimble basis than we've had to in the past, even though arts, culture, and historic preservation groups have been incredibly nimble. We're going to be challenged to do it even better. So because we're creative, I think we can do this. Jameson, what's our next page? I think, yeah, this is the fun part. So that is my tiny, tiny little planning models for your consideration. Now, when we look at today's session, well, darn it, we've got some great different perspectives and some different experiences. We've got historic preservation nonprofits with Heather from Historic Sugartown, Connor from the History Center, theater, whether it's live theater, such as People Delight in Theater, or film theater from the Colonial with Jane and then Emily, or from the Uptown, which is actually kind of a combination, I'd say, April. And then visual arts. Anthony's doing a lot of stuff indoors, and all of us are doing some stuff indoors. So there's an overlay of indoors, and just visual arts is just one example. The other thing is we kind of slice and dice why we have this panel today is on the next page. The other is actually, as we were preparing for this, we realized that everybody has been working since COVID started over a year ago, but we've got different reopening phases. Heather, you said at Historic Sugartown, you really have been open since September, so in the fall at a limited capacity with your programs. Anthony, I heard from the Oxford Art Alliance when we talked, you've been open since February. You really reopened for your spring, and a lot of your stuff has been virtual. Emily, you've been open for the long haul, and you've done different things at the Colonial outdoors and indoors with limited seating. At the Uptown, April, you've got the month, April. Again, lots of virtual stuff, but opening the doors in a different way. And Connor, you've been open throughout in a very limited capacity, but doing some incredible things, most definitely. And Jane, as one of the larger theaters dealing with a lot of unionization and actors' equity, you've had some limited outdoor programming, but an unclear reopening date at this point because there's a lot more considerations from some of the groups you're working with. So we have different perspectives on reopening. And if I have incorrectly stated anything, it's now going to be your time to help us fix that and help us figure out what's going on. So why don't we hit the next page, Jameson, and take a look at some of the questions we're going to talk about. Okay, I'm taking a picture of this page so I remember this, because what I like to do is actually go to full screen so we can see everybody's faces. So let's have this conversation, folks. How has your arts organization made decisions on reopening? Who's been involved in the planning and kind of walking through things with you? Have you done it alone? Have you had help? And what has that planning process been like? And how often do you get to change your reopening protocols? And how do you balance health and safety with the dollars and the numbers? That's a tough one. And then how do you foresee things being different in the near future and the farther future? And what have we learned thus far from COVID that's actually kind of useful? Because to go through all this and ignore it, we've got to have some lessons learned and best practices. So those are the questions we'd like to discuss. And Jameson, if you can go full screen, let's do that so we can have a discussion. And folks, please unmute yourselves unless you have a lot of background stuff so that we can have a good discussion on this. So our thought leaders are to jump in first, but I know the rest of you have very, very important things going on and you're going to be able to add to it. So what's going on? Who would like to jump in first on the questions of how have you been making decisions about reopening? Who's been involved? Who's helped you? What's it been like? How nimble do you have to be? Ready, set, jump.
I'll go first because the Colonial has been open since July of 2020.
Thanks, Emily.
So we won't consider ourselves technically reopened until 3 things can happen all at once. And then I'll back into answering, Karen, the first part of your question. The three things that would have to happen are that feature films return to theaters nationally, which, as any of you know, if you're a movie lover, they haven't done that yet. In fact, in some cases, blockbusters have gone straight to at-home streaming, like the new Wonder Woman film, for the very first time, which is very interesting for us as a film exhibitor. But we're not just film 7 days a week. We also host live arts, so concerts, comedy, personalities. Live, we believe, won't return until late 2021 at the earliest. And then the third thing that would have to occur would be 100% capacity, because as all of you know, probably, the margins in our arts sector, they're pretty tight. So really, a lot of reopening has been about trying to figure out, like, what's the sweet spot where we can keep things going so that we really can eventually reopen. And I think that that has guided a lot of our decision making, was just thinking that if we are able to do a minimal amount of programming, we will have the best chance for eventually reopening, whenever that is. And so that certainly guided our decision to reopen in early July for in-person films, in accordance with guidelines regarding capacity. I think at the time it was something like 10% of each venue, and our largest venue is 658 seats. So as it stands, as a live arts presenter, we're on the petite side when you compare us to theaters of our era. So that really does factor into a lot of decision making. But a lot of our decision making is dependent on external conditions, right? Because we're exhibiting content that we're not necessarily producing, like People's Light, for example. We're not a producing house. Another thing that guided our reopening plans was the comfort level of staff. So our general manager and our house manager, who were going to have to be the front facing staff who were going to interact with any patrons coming to the box office. So it was really critical that they felt comfortable interacting with the public. And I think, when you work in a nonprofit, if you want to have a culture of giving that's successful, it starts with your staff and your volunteers and your board, of course. So as far as decision making regarding reopening, it wasn't laborious or drawn out. I mean, we simply turned to all the wonderful national medical resources that existed at the time, in as much as they were out there, because at that point our knowledge and understanding was still evolving to an extent. Although I think at that point in time, the CDC had already come out with their study about respiring and singing in closed spaces. And there was a choir that met, and there was an incredible rate of transmission. And this sparked a study on just how dangerous was it to be indoors, engaged in some of these activities that our organizations engage in. And as it turned out, it was pretty dangerous. So we put together a pretty cut and dry 3-page set of policies for cleaning, for staff practices, including temperature checks and logging and things like that. We have been fogging our theaters with a hydrogen peroxide solution after every film screening, which adds a lot of time to our day, because it takes about 45 minutes in between each screening. So that limits what we're able to do. And, from there, we just sort of, continually reassessed and pivoted as needed. So I think I covered everything.
So Emily, you're going to be able to share that lovely 3-pager with us, and
Sure,
Genesee will
absolutely.
put on
Yeah,
our
and
website?
absolutely.
That'd be terrific. Resources are so, not reinventing the wheel is a great thing.
Sure, yeah, and these were based on some external resources like NATO, the National Association of Theater Owners, and Cinema Safe, which we're a part of, which is just a collection of theaters across the country that are adherent to best practices. You can go on our website too, and we make these policies and procedures visible to the public. And I would say that they're really not very different from what we have in this document, and everything is very succinct and to the point. And I think that's important too, is just complete and total transparency does help generate public trust. But having said that, even though we've been reopened since July, and this is the last thing I'll say, audiences have not returned to theater going en masse.
Oh, interesting. So
Yeah,
you
so
have been open.
being re-
So, I mean, is
Yeah.
it 1 out of every 20 seats are filled or something like that? What's
Well,
your-
so in our last normal fiscal year of operation, we sold over 73,000 admissions at the Colonial.
yeah.
And from July to about February 10th, we sold over just a little over 4,000.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
All
So,
right.
just because you're open doesn't mean people will come.
Right.
So I think really
Yeah.
understanding the psychology of our patrons will be helpful, but it's going to be time.
It will. It will.
Yeah.
And I see that when I work out at the Y. I mean, yesterday when I walked in, there was nobody on the equipment and nobody in the pool. I thought, it's safer, but it's going to take a while to build up public confidence. Definitely. And I just learned about hydrogen peroxide spraying. So how many of you others do a hydrogen peroxide spraying? Raise those little chat hands, I didn't. Yeah. Thank you. All right. So Jane, would you like to tag on to Emily's start?
Sure. The thing I would like to touch on a little bit is about decision making. When we shut down 2 plays we had in progress in March of 2020, we quickly figured out a system of meetings and for staff leadership, meeting frequently with board leadership. And ultimately, after the initial shock, our entire staff got involved in brainstorming and talking about the feasibility of various programs and scenarios that we could do despite not being able to produce plays in our 2 theaters, which is our core activity. So we quickly, fairly quickly by summer, had put up in our parking lot a stage and held outdoor concerts, drive-in concerts. So people would drive in and then they had a parking spot next to them where they could put up chairs. Everyone was masked. And it was really a delight for both all the musicians who were really just, so pleased to be performing, and for the 65 cars worth of folks that would come to these performances. And we are doing that again this summer. So outdoor is one piece of where we pivoted to. We do have a production staff that was able to put up this stage. And one of our goals during COVID has been to keep artists and staff employed and remain in connection with our various communities.
Jane, I'm sorry, I need a little clarification.
Sure.
I did not go to your things last summer. Did you say you did an outdoor stage and 65 parking spaces so that people didn't get out of their vehicles?
We have, if you've been to People's Light,
Yeah.
we've got these huge parking lots, and particularly the one in the back is where we were
Yeah.
able to have we decided to have up to 65 cars. We could have more than 100 cars in there. So we had 65 cars, and each car had a spot next to it where they could come out with their chairs and their tables and their food and sit there and enjoy the concert. And our farmhouse restaurant, which is a wholly owned for-profit subsidiary of People's Light, delivered meals which had been pre-ordered online via golf cart to these folks.
My gosh.
And you could have 5 people in your car plus a couple of kids. That was the plan. And that's what we'll do again this summer. And we're going to have 16 concerts that we'll announce pretty soon. Emily had mentioned in a previous meeting that they work with Point Entertainment, and we have partnered with Point as well for these concerts.
Financially, do you make or lose money on that?
Kind of break even. We also got some sponsors.
Good. Yeah. Sponsors. Yeah.
Township chipped in last summer, which was really awesome. We're not sure if they'll be able to do it this summer because they have their own programming. So that's the highest priority. They have their own outdoor programming they're intending to do. And we had some corporate sponsors too.
Mm-hmm.
And then we had a second outdoor program, which was called Family Folk Tales, which we will again do this summer. And these are stories written by members of our artistic staff that are inspired by Native American, Korean, and other folktale traditions. And that is where families sit in a small circle, socially distanced in their little pod on the ground, and they will watch on a small stage in another area that we have, 2 performers telling these stories for about 40 minutes or so.
Oh my gosh.
That again this summer. And then I will just quickly say, we also have done a lot of digital programming.
Right.
At the beginning, some free programming, particularly inspired by the killing of George Floyd, a number of affiliated artists, Black artists that we commissioned to make work in reaction to that. And then, and some other educational resources that we had online. And then we, by the end of the summer, planned and then launched a premium digital series of programs which have been made in different ways. Some filmed safely on our main stage with a lot of protocols in place, small groups here and there of performers coming in separately and that sort of thing. And then we did a Zoom series, like almost a soap opera style serial series. And we will also be presenting the work of that was commissioned by 2 theaters, the Marin Theater Company and another theater company in, I think, a few months ago, that we will also present, if you will, as a streamed premium digital program for our audiences. And we also did a Christmas Carol concert. That was our first one in the holidays.
So what did you find about the attendance?
Attendance for the digital.
The digital.
Yeah, we were conservatively budgeted for that. The price is quite low, but we did exceed our projections. We're happy with that. We're getting a few hundred. I think we have now for our current production, which I didn't even mention, which is fantastic. Everyone should check it out. It's called Spiritual Uprising, a concert. I think more than 500 have streamed it. So these are small numbers compared to obviously what we typically have, but people all over the world have access to them and are attending. And we've seen people be very generous around their ticket purchases, adding a donation. And in general, we've been, because our earned income is drastically reduced, we have had to make up with additional contributed income. And that's how we've kept on.
Right, right. Okay, so that gives us an overview. Connor, what's going on at the History Center? You've been kind of open throughout in different ways.
Yeah, we reopened in October, so we were lucky in the sense that a lot of the museums had already kind of figured out the equation of reopening. We had the standard protection material inside, and we limited the amount of people we allowed in the building at any time, whether it be researchers or academics in our library. We limited it to 2 in the morning and 2 in the afternoon, which is much less than what we normally have. And with admission, we also put in time tickets so that we could limit the number of people who were flowing through the galleries. But realizing that we were going to be losing any kind of K through 12 visitation, which is huge for us, or general visitation, we moved our programming digital. Digital or in person on the exterior of the building. So all of our talks, lectures went Zoom, which has done exceptional for us. In the past, we were doing a lecture for 20 people in the area or who would be members. We're now averaging 90 people per talk and getting
90 people per Zoom talk?
Yeah, we had
Good for you.
we had 95, I believe, last night, and we have a talk coming up next month that we have 500 that are signed up for.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, we have 170,000 impressions on social for it. If you're interested in mansions of the main line, check it out. Apparently people like mansions and those that are well off. So digitally, that's certainly something that we're going to continue doing. When you're talking about merging the digital and then the in-person, we will eventually have to marry the two as we move forward. Our programming has also moved to the exterior of the building. We've started doing walking tours, not just on historical topics, but also thematically, dark history, pestilence and poisons, and they have all sold out. We're working on really expanding the dark history one in October of this year. We did 7 last year that sold out within, I think, about a week. We're now trying to look up amping up our staffing so that we could run one every night. If you're interested in any of that, our director of education, Jennifer Green, is pretty much a genius when it comes to that kind of thing. And she's really been changing how we do some of these programs.
Is dark history about ghosts?
No, that's what everybody wants it to be, but when they find out it's just about murder and some other dark things that actually happened, they are also happy with that as well. We've found that people are very much into some of the darker things that have happened in our county.
Pestilence and poisons and dark history dealing with murder.
Yeah. Well, we also have
a tough year.
We have sweets that are happening this. If you like chocolate, we have a sweets walk. We had a Happy Holidays one. I'm trying to push for a darker Christmas one this year. I like Krampus and Belsnickel, if you know what those are. I have kids, so somebody giving my kid a good whack every now and then. They deserve it.
Okay.
We've also gone with programming our events outdoors. So we've had one in October, one in December, and we're doing our spring festival on the exterior of our building on May 1st. And they've gone over very well.
So October, you said you had 3 programs outdoors that went over well. Which the spring festival is coming up. What else did you have?
Yeah, we replicated the same equation for all 3. We did essentially a vendor village. So we set up tables all around and brought in retailers from across the county. We wanted to promote local vendors who might be hurt financially. We have our own programs that we're putting out there and reaching out to our members that way. So December, we called it a holiday village, and we didn't promote it that much, but we still had about 200 to 300 people show up for it. Our spring festival is the same equation, much more programming, but we've been marketing it this time. We're trying to see if we can double that number.
Connor, it sounds to me as that outsider that COVID has actually pushed the History Center to be much more accessible and to people. And I know that so many folks have a sort of museum fear. If I go into a museum or whatever, I don't know. So you're actually bringing things to people in a whole different way, partially because of COVID, partially because you're forced to because of COVID. And it actually is bringing in audiences that haven't walked in the door, perhaps?
Yeah, we've restructured all of our offerings right now, and we will have to do again post-COVID. But it's good for us to get our face out there. We've been pulling back for quite some time. So we're trying to reopen, and one thing that we're starting to get out there is there's been studies recently with museums that they are some of the safest places you can actually visit because of the systems that we have for our air handling. It actually makes it more difficult for people in public areas to get infected. So we're starting to actually put some little more marketing dollar behind us.
Okay. And Emily, I just noticed your chat about your Krampus Christmas film. What was that? Go ahead.
Yeah. So I didn't really address programming, but I will just say quickly that we have taken a detour into virtual. And we have found it less successful as a film exhibitor because content is so ubiquitous. And of course, theaters like ours have been sort of trying to figure out how to navigate at-home viewing for a long time, and getting people to the theater is important to us because of concessions and alcohol. Also, remember, it's true.
Sounds like a cruise.
Exactly. It is a cruise. It's a temporary escape from reality, or, engagement with content, people are interested in it. Anyway, so we miss out on that opportunity, and coming to the theater is also reinforcing giving, because every time someone comes to the box office, we ask them, are you a member? Because they get benefits. They get a discount on tickets, no film ticket fee, that sort of thing. And of course, not having programming during the holiday season is really challenging for a theater, because that's when you do a lot of your engagement at year end. And we have had an outpouring of support that's helped us to continue to minimally operate when about 70% of what we require to keep the theater going comes from earned revenues. So, but Cults, Fright Night, and classic programming are some of our most beloved series. And we've done a lot of virtual viewing parties with the Cult and Fright Night audiences, with some Discord chats. We did test a happy hour series. It wasn't as successful as we thought it was going to be. And our big virtual program was, for the very first time in 21 years, Blobfest, our big annual signature event, was delivered as a virtual festival. And that typically nets over $30,000 for our organization. And it brought in a little under a third of that amount of revenue, just to give you a sense of what it means for our organization to have virtual programming. And we also investigated the idea of a drive-in movie theater, but for a variety of reasons I won't go into, we decided not to go down that road. So. But yes, that your Dark History series sounds amazing, and we certainly have a lot of interest in that content at the Colonial. So
We can talk later.
Very good. Good. April, if you tell me you have Cult and Fright Night at the Uptown, what's going on at the Uptown?
Yeah, we've been slow and steady. Our youth programming has been pretty consistent during the pandemic. So that has been going on. We had to shut that down early on, but then kicked it back into between the online and in person over the summer. We started our live streaming in October with Mark Zandy and How Real. And so that was our first, and that's part of our speaker series, our first live stream performance that did well from our perspective, only because we didn't know who would come and participate. It was still so new. So it did very, very well. We were very pleased with that. And then since then, we've just kind of been tiptoeing over the summer. Last year, we did an outdoor theater. We went over to the High Street Garage. We had a couple of programming up there, which was actually fun, but logistically very, very difficult. And so, it's been a lot of that kind of trial and error as to, how to bring people together and, but, manage the logistics of it as well.
April, did you say you're not going to be doing more outdoor theater on the garage this summer now, or what are you thinking?
I don't know. It's not something that we've completely put an end to, but it's a heavy lift. So it's something that we just kind of have to weigh in, and if we're able to get a similar response indoor, then we'll try that as well. We did do one that was indoor that, got it. We have, it's a small theater. We don't usually do a lot of patrons anyway for a movie. And, we're somewhere around, 20 patrons, 30, 50 patrons, depending on the movie that it is, especially with the sing-along, which we're having for Bohemian Rhapsody. People love the sing-alongs. So we're going to try it and see if they'll come out for that. But that's have a sing-along with your mask on,
Yeah. Are you doing sing-alongs with your mask on? How are you balancing that?
Well, we'll see. We'll see how that goes. I mean, it's still the social distancing, so we are very, very limited on how many people we're allowed to have in there. And then, trying to do a sing along. I know people are complaining that they can't breathe talking. So, to do a sing along, where anything and everything to really engage with our community to see what do you want, and we'll bring it. We did have we tried to keep up with our artist perspective, where we would host our artists to be able to have a gallery in our bar. And we did have some people come through. It was beautiful artwork, but they even said it's just very, very difficult for people to come in. They just weren't ready at the time. So we're hoping that now, with weather changing and people, feeling pretty good and getting vaccinated, we updated our air purification system. So it's all of these little steps to help encourage people to come out when they're ready.
Mhm. Anthony or Heather, who wants to jump in next? Anthony, you're opening up now, yeah, last month, right?
Yeah, so with us, it was kind of off and on. We wanted to make sure we staggered everything because we have two main components. We have the education component for the art and music lessons, which are private art and music lessons, and we have the two galleries, the main gallery and the emerging artist gallery. So with us, it was kind of a balancing act. We did not want to open everything at once. So we worked alongside a lot of the board members and talked first with the faculty to figure out a way to do things hybrid. Because we have a very small facility and we have about 150 to 175 at any given time students per week for private instruction. Considering the main majority of those students are piano students or drum students, it makes it a little bit difficult for us because that's a shared instrument.
Yeah.
So
bring your own piano.
I've been cleaning piano keys. It's crazy. But it's been, what we did is we wanted to create an alternative for everyone. So even if the teacher did want to come back in person, we wanted to maintain that 6-foot space. We wanted to maintain social distancing. And we worked with the teachers to try and make sure that they had all the tools in hand to make that happen. So a great example is the drum instructor, John, was able to set up a screen in front of his students where the music stand would be far on the other side of the room, so he can actually point to the sheet music in real time and they can see it on a screen that he doesn't need to be in the area next to them. And we've just found that finding a virtual alternative to everything, whether it's private lessons, we switched from doing in-person recitals for the kids pre-COVID, which we would have done our recitals here in the gallery. The big obstacle that we found was making sure that people felt like they weren't losing value because something was virtual. And I think that was a stereotype in 2020. So instead of just making an alternative that's virtual, we wanted it to still be of value to the student and the family. So what we did is we started focusing more on recording techniques. So ended up getting some uploading Logic and GarageBand and all sorts of new programs into the office. The students that are able to come back in person can now work with the computers and they're recording their recitals one track at a time. They're learning recording skills. And some of them actually like this more. So rather than just making a virtual alternative, we wanted to just make sure that there was that value there. We did our first virtual recital last week, which was a mixture of things. Some students took videos from home. Some came in and recorded here in the studio. And it was a good first virtual recital. And a lot of the parents and the students actually want to start doing that more often. As for art, we had a 3-day opening this weekend. And with that, we also wanted to make sure that there was value in what we were doing online. So what we tried to do with those shows, we have the Luigi Rist and the CX Carlson show up now, and then Abby Dudley and the Emerging Artists Gallery. We just tried to have a virtual alternative that we could get out to folks, but it provided something that the in-person visit didn't. So our art coordinator, Caitlin, did a fantastic job of putting together digital 3D galleries through Art Steps. which is almost like a video game experience. Like you walk through the Arts Alliance space as if you're walking through like a video game environment. It's really, really cool. And then she also, for the less technical folks, she put together just a simple flip folio on the website that people can visit it and read about the work from home. And then we've been experimenting with podcasting, just interviewing the artists. So if someone is looking at the work, they're not comfortable coming to an opening for an artist talk, they can listen to that while looking at the work. And we actually, I forget who mentioned it, we actually have seen more traffic online for a lot of these events than we have in person in the past. Usually for an artist talk, whether it be the National Juried Show, we would get an average of 15 to 20 people in the gallery. It's a pretty small space. I was astonished that I checked Google Analytics this morning just to be certain. We had over, since Friday, over 200 hits on the website for visiting the virtual gallery. The National Juried Show,
Congratulations.
Yeah, there were like 75 attendees back in the fall for the National Juried Show, because it opened up an avenue for us, because it's
Right.
folks sending art from all over the country. They can't always get here to hear what the juror has to say.
Yeah.
So by making that digital alternative, we actually had more engagement with the program than we have in the past.
Right.
And
So
other
wait,
than-
Anthony, you said podcasting, flip photos, and what was the first the app you were talking about that Caitlin was working with? I missed the name of that.
Oh, it's called Art Steps.
Art
So
Steps.
It's a program online. It allows you to digitally recreate your gallery space. We both have a little bit of background with some Adobe products. We were able to kind of digitize certain aspects of the Arts Alliance to make it feel more like the real space.
Right.
So we were able to make like a 3D model online of the gallery that it allows you to do. We could interview the artists and put their vocals above the work of art so that people could literally take a tour and hear. And again, just trying to create something where people don't feel that that stereotype of it's just a Band-Aid. Like we wanted people to be just as engaged online as they were in person when they were walking around and talking to the musicians or the artists.
Done an amazing job for a little place that just opened a couple years ago new, small, incredible.
Coffee.
Yeah. But what kind?
Black, very caffeinated coffee. It's
Nice.
we're trying to find ways that we can use this as a learning experience now and maybe implement these same type. Like we have no intention of stopping any of that. Like I actually think that we're reaching more people this way.
Yeah.
For lessons, it's going to take a long time for a lot of the kids and the families to feel comfortable visiting the gallery again and taking private lessons. So, I found myself driving my guitar and dropping it off. We have some extra guitars, dropping it off for students who don't have one to plug in at home, things like that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it keeps everything going. And like I said, we want to build on what we've done so far, that we can just keep these virtual galleries, keep these flip folios and things like that going into the future, that it'll just be a supplement when we're back to in person.
Okay. Heather, historic, Sugartown. Whole other
Yeah.
place, right?
What's that?
Whole other place.
Whole other place. Yeah. And what's interesting at Historic Sugartown, even before we reopened that as a museum, we couldn't completely 100% shut down because Historic Sugartown has 2 residential tenants and about 4 or 5 given at any time office tenants. And the majority of our office tenants were deemed essential workers. So right out of the gate, we had to very quickly figure out what our cleaning procedures were, what was the building access procedures were, what would happen if a tenant came down with COVID, what was the phone tree to let people know. Thankfully, that never happened back during the closures. So that was our first phase, really. And then, of course, all our on-site programming, like CCHC, was shut down for quite a while. We started bringing it back slowly with our tours in July. But we had to switch, and we think this might become a permanent thing, to advanced ticketing for everything. And what we're trying to decide is down the line, will we allow walk-in tours to purchase a ticket online that morning? But right now,
Yeah,
it's more
advanced
like that.
ticketing has really gotten to be the norm, of course. And
Yes, yeah.
not
And
a bad thing as far as planning.
it's a wonderful thing in terms of planning, because if we had in the past, if we had a washout on a Saturday, we'd still be paying our guides to be sitting there
Right.
waiting for the walk-in traffic. And most museums and historic sites rely heavily on the walk-in visitor. So that's the piece I think in the long term we'll have to figure out, balance, well, how are we going to handle the walk-in visitor? Because we very much love to bring that back at some point. But in the meantime, for planning purposes, it has saved us money and has been able to mobilize our resources a lot easier. The other big piece at Historic Sugartown is our workshops in the bookbindery, which is the image behind me. Our very intrepid and amazing bookbinder, right from the get-go, is saying, hey, I want to try a virtual workshop. We were thinking, wow, Ramon, your workshops are 4 hours. You're talking about the 4-hour Zoom. Here's your 4-hour Zoom. I want to try to do a virtual workshop, and let's see what happens. So we tried it out with our volunteers, and then and it worked very smoothly. We figured out how to mail. When he rolled out his book binding workshop, which requires a sewing frame that you do the sewing on, our facilities manager started manufacturing small sewing frames that we ship to participants, and then they attend. And we really didn't know where this would go. We thought it would be fairly temporary. And we have since, as you can see in the photograph, we've got folks in masks in the bindery. We have people back in the bindery at 50% capacity now, which means 4 people. So, where we can't maximize, and they sell out. They sold out before and they still sell out. Now the virtual programs, for the most part, are selling out. And what's really exciting to us, like Anthony and Connor and some of the others have mentioned, getting folks we've had people come from attend the virtual workshops from Texas, Wisconsin, California. We're hitting a whole market of people who are enthusiastic about book restoration or book binding or different parts of the book arts crafts that there's nowhere to go personally to do this in a lot of parts of the country. And we always thought that was kind of the case, but we never were able to capitalize on that national audience before. And now we have it and it's growing. So that's another thing I don't think is going to go away, and it may in fact grow. But we're also very pleased to bring back the on-site workshop. I think the other area, and no one really got into this some people touched on this too much, a little bit, but is Historic Sugartown. We're a site with 9 acres, 11 buildings and structures. And a lot of our programs are focused in the summer on outdoors and access between the buildings. And we are also very dependent on that outdoor fundraiser or indoor fundraiser. And last year we were making plans right before everything shut down. We had planned to switch from doing our traditional barbecue type on the site fundraiser to a full-on gala. And we had just put the deposit down, and we were planning in January, and all systems were go. And we realized immediately that there was no way that event was going to happen and be financially successful in 2020. So we just said, okay, we're setting that aside. We're not even going to speak of this to the public, because we haven't gotten that far.
Bring it back later.
Yep, exactly.
Wrap
And
it up.
then this January, we started talking about it again, because we had the option of doing it in 2021. And we talked about it, and we're watching the capacities, and we're watching the way, even with vaccinations coming back, we realized, this is so expensive to put on, between the invitations and getting people there, and the food and the venue, the full venue fee. It's reliant on maxing out how many people are there.
Table it, wrap it up. Next year, revisit.
So we've pushed it off to 2022. The venue coordinator we were both laughing, because we said, well, hopefully. So we've made the decision, we're not going to have that in-person big fundraiser that we put out to everyone, that this is our fundraiser for their year this year, and we're going to do an appeal again. Remains to be seen how that goes this year. It was successful last year. We are going to be bringing back some in-person things this summer. We have next Saturday, we open the village for our regular tours. Again, very limited because our buildings are small. This building that I'm in, we can't have more than 5 people in there at a time. So that kind of dictates how many people we can have on a tour right now. But we've teamed up with Land Arts Events, and they're having a plein air event at Sugartown next weekend. Just very casual. We're going to let folks know that's happening. You can come, wear your masks if you approach the artists or on the grounds or whatnot, but we're doing it very softly right now. In June, we are planning right now, one of our larger summer seasonal events was our beer gardens that would bring 400 plus people to the site. We're going to bring those back, but we're doing it in a very scaled down ticketed format, whereas before they were, anybody can walk in the door that night. We're working on that now and coming up with maps of how to keep the site safe and people distance and procedures, and what is our messaging throughout the entire, before the event and at the event, to make sure everyone keeps each other safe. Our biggest stumbling block for bringing back any of our in-person and seasonal events is volunteers and vaccinations. And while that, right now, folks are able to get vaccinated, and in a few months, hopefully that will ease a little bit, there's still that hesitancy, rightful to have that hesitancy. So we're trying to figure out, how big do you go without not having enough volunteer and people resources to pull this stuff off and keep everyone safe at the same time. So that will continue to drive us when we put together our seasonal events that we normally have in the fall. We're still not sure how we're going to do that, because they're very dependent on indoor space as well. So
much more deliberate planning, and also much more straightforward, almost ruthless. Wait a second, put that aside. We'll come back to that in another year or whatever. Yeah. Can't afford to make any mistakes. They're going to be too expensive. Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah. Well, this has been a good overview of the incremental steps in reopening, taking a look at the digital and virtual alternatives, which have now turned into hybrids because of some of the benefits of exposure nationally that have come. And it really stresses to me that there's not just a going from closed to full capacity. It's going to be that slow burn reopening with small numbers slowly building up over time. And it's going to be a financial burn because it's going to lose money without a lot of sponsorships. So the need for sponsorships to supplement that over the next year or two. And when COVID struck, we kind of thought, oh, it's going to take 4 years for arts, culture, historic preservation groups to kind of regain their footing. And I'm still looking at that it's a slow burn to reopen, and things are changing, definitely. I'm wondering, before we have a few minutes, maybe 5 minutes or so, questions, comments, observations, ahas from the group. There's been a lot of silence on this one. So does anybody have any observations or any ahas or comments to add or questions? And also future topics. Are there burning issues that you want us to cover? And whether you want to speak out or just put them in the chat room or email them, what else do we need to get out on the table?
Karen, I have a question.
Yeah, Frank.
This is Frank Mercurio. I'm the relatively new treasurer at the Millet and Selma.
Ah,
And it's nice to see Heather. Heather, you know, your footprints are all over there.
yes, they are, Frank, aren't they?
Yes, they are. Here is my question. Several people, I think Emily brought this up, but it's also something I've been thinking about. This idea about staff comfort level, which
Yeah.
clearly is very important. As you may know, in Selma now is 100% volunteer,
Mhm.
from the board down to people, you know, in the gift shop. And also, I don't know what our average age is, but I can tell you we are not spring chickens. We're in planning a reopening. So right now, for example, we're roughly talking about a post-Labor Day reopening.
Oh, wow.
But given what that requires in terms of advanced planning, how have others been able to assess the comfort levels of their staffs towards reopening, especially this far in advance? I mean, we could
You know,
certainly,
Frank,
but you know, things could change in 6 months.
I have found that people are not comfortable, and it's usually, I mean, we just had, Mike Korek is our governance committee chair, and we were talking about doing a board gathering this August, and our board is not spring chicken. I mean, the age is between 30 and 90. I was amazed by how many people over age 60 who have already had their 2 vaccines are hesitant about coming out in August in an outdoor space just to have cocktails with other board members.
Yep.
So people's comfort level is not, I mean, we heard it, that just because you open doesn't mean people will come. There was one person working out at the Y. Connor has, what, 2 people in a room for some things. Emily's got 1/10 of folks coming out for films. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's going to be slow. So
Okay.
yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, and the staff most likely is younger, so the vaccines will take longer to get, but what do y'all think? I mean,
I would say we've seen some polling that people are really eager to come back, even to the
Yeah.
theater. And that
Oh.
may happen by the end of this year at various places. Stay tuned, you know, for things around the country you may start hearing. It's really interesting to see, you know, as you poll people. Our board talked about what's important to them, to feel safe, and they want to know everyone's vaccinated. They want to know there's going to be masking, the social distancing. You know, it's just going to be interesting to see how it all plays out. But I would say there's a pretty good degree of demand out there to come back.
so communicating what the safety issues or safety protocols are, gearing up for modest numbers and expecting probably even smaller numbers is probably the reality, but yeah, over gearing up a bit. Unless you're a restaurant sitting outside, then people are coming in Westchester, which I don't understand, to tell you the truth.
Indoors too. Yeah, at those restaurants. It's amazing.
I don't get it.
I don't get it either.
Yeah, other different audience perhaps.
Mhm.
Other
Thank you.
comments, ideas, observations?
Oh, I was just gonna pop in that Jane, you mentioned you were doing polls and stuff. So Frank, that might be a way to gauge your staff's comfort level in the poll, or you know, a survey, or send out an email, or you know, even you can. There's ways to make it anonymous too. If the staff are uncomfortable letting you know where they stand, because staff might be uncomfortable letting you know that they're uncomfortable with reopening. So there might be ways to do some polls and just send out an email and be like, let me know, if you're comfortable and why not.
Go for the other, it's just some face-to-face conversations.
Or
And
that
just-
too,
It's
yeah.
probably not staff. Frank, it's probably isn't going to be
well,
enough guests in order to make it worth the while. And the answer is maybe or maybe not, but maybe you have to reopen anyway. Because if you don't reopen, they won't come at all.
Exactly.
We
exactly.
had to have a conversation with everybody about their comfort level.
Right.
And there,
We'll
we
do
had two
different
members.
things.
Yeah, we had two members who were not comfortable and still aren't comfortable. And we found a way for them to participate and support the programming in a way that they are comfortable and we're
Right.
still able to execute.
I'm doing something similar. We've have, it's only 3 staffers, and one has a brand new baby, and we're all kind of in the different trajectory in terms of getting our vaccinations. And my rule of thumb has been right up until, vaccinations were more commonplace. It's like, look, we can't even consider some of these larger in-person things until people at least have the opportunity to get vaccinated and they're comfortable. For us, it's still, there's, you may have staff, in my case, I do, where you have, there's family issues, and that goes for me as well, that early on, we're like, we're not comfortable doing face-to-face until this, so we're starting to have some in-person meetings on the site. But again, we meet those criteria, like it can only be a certain number of people and so forth.
Right.
I think one of the big things is when you get closer to reopening, figure out how many people you can max out on, to have there as guests and work backward. And then to figure out how many volunteers you'll need to pull it off in a way that's safe. We keep talking about whether or not we should have mask ambassadors, which was brought up at one of the other sessions that the CVB just had. And we're like, well, we don't really want our volunteers, our people being mask police at the same time, because, at a future date, you could be the same person asking that person for a gift. So
Yes.
you don't want to be, play the role of the jerk at the same time. So I don't know if there is an answer here, but I think in terms of the volunteers themselves, it's like Jamison said, it's polling folks, talking to them regularly. One of our guides just reached out and said, I'm not comfortable with doing this, but I'm happy to do this, this, and this. We're like, great, we'll put you on that.
Right.
So, and then another person was, a month later, came back and said, I'm ready. I got vaccinated. I'm done. I want to see people again, So yeah. And so what I guess my point is, people's perspectives are going to continue to change as this whole thing continues to change. So, I mean, I could come in next week and find out half the people have said, I've changed my mind.
Yeah, exactly. That's my concern.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah. Any other comment, question, observation before we wind up at 1:15? Mike Horak, I see your cat there. See, this looks well. Other topics that we should be cognizant of for future? We'll do marketing communications for our next session. Other topics on people's mind, or does it just make sense to get together to kind of do some peer best practice sharing? We're going to find out. We'll survey you then. All right. So Jamison, what do we have for resources as we go forward? And then we'll do our farewell.
I'm going to share the PowerPoint one more time.
Jane, what do you got? You got something I just didn't see coming up on the chat room. Jane, you can talk.
I just threw in there, I didn't mention the People's Light Education programs that have continued virtually, and they'll be outdoors this summer. And I wanted to mention that the Spiritual Uprising piece that is streaming now is available for free to students and educators.
Nice.
So take a look, save that link if you're interested.
Thank you. And if you have favorite resources that you've been using that you found real useful, please send them to Jamison or info so that we can get them on the website and share it with anybody who's looking. There's, we have local, statewide, and national sort of the best ofs here, and some samples and just some regional samples as well. So we try to put some resource links online, but there's so much out there. So we just tried to pull the ones that people seem to use the most and find most useful.
Yeah, and
Jameson?
these are going to be on the handout, which I sent out, but we'll send out again, and then also on the website.
Great, great. And we just got a request for cleaning techniques for from the chat room. So if there's other topics that people are interested in, yeah, now that I've learned about hydrogen peroxide spray, we have all kinds of things to think about. So I would like to thank you for coming out today and really tell us what's going on. And it's great to know that things are starting to happen, slow but sure. Lots of challenges, and thank goodness arts, culture, and historic preservation is resilient and incredibly creative. And taking COVID lessons learned and trying to turn lemons into lemonade. So you all are doing incredible work, and please keep incredibly healthy, because we need the creativity of the sector and the inspiration. And it's what makes the world, especially Chester County, incredibly successful. So yeah. Oh, and Anthony, I see that you're sharing cleaning techniques already. So yeah, you know what? Why don't you send them over as well to Jameson so that we can get them everybody. That's great. The CDC site is, you found something that on the CDC site that was really useful. So yeah, it's hard to call through that. Thank you.
There's a site that actually gives you, you can run, it'll show you what products can kill coronavirus. So you can actually look at a bottle of cleaning solution or whatever it is, and it'll tell you if it's effective or not. So that's been helpful for us.
Very cool. Good, good, good. All right. Thank you very much. Stay healthy. Go out and about, mask up, keep rolling. Very nice. I thank you everybody for participating and for everything you're doing. Be well.
Good to see you.
We'll see you in a couple of weeks. It'll go fly by. It's amazing to me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Karen.